how well do you think this will play DY with Avery and company offensively, and where it raises perhaps the ceiling of the offense?
Three things come to mind. One is just knowing people around the program. I think Avery Johnson was pretty excited about this move.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. John Kurtz, Derek Young, Cole Manbeck with you. We're talking some football today. Our schedule is finally syncing up to let us talk about all the changes with the football staff, which have come pretty fast and furious here in the last week, starting with Conor Riley leaving to go be the offensive line coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Man, so a lot going on. I'm sure, hey, look, regardless of how you feel about all this, we can all raise a glass to Conor Riley getting a job with the Dallas Cowboys. Pretty awesome. And gave K-State a lot of great years as the offensive line coach here. So, of course, if you're going to do that, do it with Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon or some 360 vodka, whichever you prefer. We'll have to ask Conor which he would prefer. Somebody send Conor some Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon for us, okay? And make sure that you got it all. Oh, DY has some insight. Okay.
They sell them in Salt Lake. I saw Ben Holiday bottled a bond at the state liquor store here in Salt Lake City.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right. Man, they got it all the way out there. That's good news. Probably because of the podcast, I would have to imagine. You know, I mean, K-State's been out to Utah a couple of times now, fairly unsuccessfully. But, you know, if you're there, if you went to the BYU game, go grab some. Head on over to Salt Lake. Get some Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon. Drown your sorrows. We appreciate them. We may talk a tiny bit of basketball at the back end here. Obviously, it's going to get dated really quick with K-State taking on Utah tonight. All right, so initial reaction comes seemingly out of nowhere. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of warning about this being something that was in the works, but K-State loses its offensive coordinator and offensive line coach in Conor Riley to the Dallas Cowboys after they go through and make some staff changes. Brian Schottenheimer now the head coach there. How do you view this, DY? Because I think a lot of fans are sort of two minds here, where there was a lot of frustration about him as the offensive coordinator last year. But then again, everybody seemed to be pretty bought in on his ability to mold together an offensive line. And you have a year where you're going to need to mold together an offensive line with a lot of new pieces.
I don't think it's an automatic net positive like some fans are blindly just kind of juxtaposing. I wouldn't go to those lengths, especially when you're going to be a little green at some of the positions to follow, such as Brian Lepak being the offensive line coach. And that's not to say I don't trust or believe in Brian Lepak to do the job, but you know, he's got much less experience at doing it, especially at this kind of level, than Conor Riley. Conor Riley gets the Dallas Cowboys job because Brian Schottenheimer hires Clayton Adams, who was the Arizona Cardinals offensive line coach. He and Conor Riley had a relationship, so that's where he kind of got in the door. And obviously Cooper Beebe was probably a big help as well, who plays offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. So that's kind of how those dominoes fell. Spring ball will be a good way to maybe get a good judge of what direction this is going. Most of the positions also have been dominoes kind of for K-State. Matt Wells gets the promotion to primary play caller. He was already the co-offensive coordinator. Brian Lepak is from tight ends coach to offensive line coach. Now they need to hire a tight ends coach. So I'll be curious. Matt Wells clearly qualified to do the job. It's been a while since he has done it, to be clear. But I think the cohesion between he and Avery Johnson will go pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the continuity with Wells, I think it was a shoo-in that Matt Wells was going to become the offensive coordinator as soon as we got the news that Conor Riley was departing for the Cowboys, which was quite the surprise. And I think the offensive coordinator position is ultimately going to be okay. I'm not all that worried about Matt Wells jumping in and hitting the ground running as the OC and the continuity there. I think the question mark will come on the offensive line with Brian Lepak, first-time offensive line coach at Kansas State. Now, a guy, though, that is familiar with working with offensive lines. He played offensive line in college, 2 years at Colorado State before transferring to Oklahoma, where he spent his final 3 years of his career, was an offensive lineman for 5 years playing college football, served as an offensive line coach at Southern right before coming to K-State. Now, that was for a COVID-shortened season where they actually played in the SWAC in the spring of 2021. So only 6 games, but he was the O-line coach there, was at Oklahoma as a grad assistant for 3 years, and was the assisting with the offensive line in those 3 seasons at Oklahoma. And I think a lot of people regard Oklahoma's offensive line coach as the best in the country, or one of the best. I'm blanking on the name. Is it
Bill Beatonbow?
Yeah. I mean, the 2018 OU offensive line won the Joe Moore Award for best offensive line in college football. And so he worked under the tutelage of him for a few years, and they produced a ton of NFL offensive linemen at Oklahoma. And so that's encouraging. And also, let's just keep in mind, Lepak is a brilliant guy. I mean, this is a guy that went to school, got his law degree, was admitted into the Oklahoma Bar Association that very same year in 2014, degrees in accounting, degrees in finance as well, and also was an academic All-American at OU. So an incredibly bright, cerebral guy that will be able to hit the ground running. And transitioning from tight ends at Kansas State as a tight ends coach to O-line, like, they're such a key part of the running game as well in this system. I think he's going to be fine. Now, you are replacing, as John mentioned, a ton of offensive linemen. You don't have a ton of continuity there. You got 3 new transfers coming in as well. What are their thoughts on all of this? That's a question. But I think also Lepak, being a guy that's not an outside hire, everybody's so familiar with, and he's so well liked and a good recruiter, I think they're going to be okay. I'll just be really curious what a Matt Wells offensive system looks like at Kansas State. And I need to go back and look at some of his offenses at Texas Tech, Utah State, et cetera, to see.
And to your point, the promotion to Wells, I think that was decided a year ago when they hired him, right? He wasn't going to stay on the staff and not eventually get that promotion to be offensive coordinator. If you just even look at his titles, he was co-offensive coordinator. As soon as he walked into the door in Manhattan, he was associate head coach. He runs a little bit more pace. I know that. Some people try to align him with the offenses that are pass heavy, and he hasn't been pass heavy really before. It's usually around 50-50, which is a little bit more than K-State was this past year. But his paces are a little bit quicker than what Conor Riley ran this past year, so that's something to think about. But this Kansas State offense, despite I know they got disjointed at times and had some struggles last year, but you have to remember they still broke the record for yards per carry, and they were number 1 in the Big 12 and broke a record for yards per play for the school as well. So it wasn't an offense that had clear deficiencies. They got in their own way at times, especially with the turnovers and where they happened, that really took away some of the successes that they were having.
Well, let's go ahead and start with the a lot of fans had speculated, DY, about like, all right, the bowl game, the offense functioned so well. Was this, Matt Wells getting the opportunity to do more after the struggles at the end of the year? I wouldn't call it like conspiracy theory, but people have kind of pieced this together. Like, hey, was this something that was already like Conor Riley being demoted in the works, and they were looking to get Matt Wells into that spot anyway? To your point, he was the co-offensive coordinator when he was hired. Like, what do you have to say about fans that were speculating about that?
According to everything I know, and I feel confident based on where I'm getting the information, I don't think that there was any truth to any of that. I don't think that their operation in terms of who was in charge or how those things filtered through the headsets changed in the bowl game compared to what they did in the regular season.
Cole, you have anything to add there?
I look, they did some unique things in the bowl game that we hadn't seen, and part of that was because DJ Giddens wasn't playing, and so they utilized the skill set of Dylan Edwards differently and got him on the edge more. There was more outside run, and so I think some people probably saw that and they're like, this looks a little bit different than what we saw, and they ran for over 300 yards in that game. But I think Conor Riley was the primary caller.
Especially if it's rugby game focused, that's going to be Conor Riley anyway.
Yeah, but DY, to your point, like, I would just remind folks of this. And I was a critic of Conor Riley for much of the season, as you guys know. I had a lot of qualms with things that happened game in and game out. I thought he got better as the season went, but there were still some frustrating moments. But, 6.1 yards per carry compared to the school record previously at 5.27. They shattered the school record this last year. The last 3 years at Kansas State, they've rushed for over 2,600 yards every season at least, and they've ranked 4th, 6th, and 8th most in rushing yards in school history in the last 3 seasons. The 2022 team, number 4 in school history in yards per carry. The 2023 team, number 7 now in yards per carry. 2021, number 9 best season in yards per carry. And obviously this last year, number 1 in yards per carry. So the last 4 seasons under Conor Riley's tutelage as the offensive line coach specifically, K-State has produced 4 of the top 10 yards per carry seasons on the ground in program history, and the most explosive offense in Kansas State football history at 6.6 yards per play, which was top 15 in the country as well. I had pulled together a chart on Kansas State. I mean, they were top 20 in a lot of different categories, and they were one of the most explosive rushing teams in the country this last year. So, you know, there are a lot of positive things that Conor Riley did. Now you look at points per drive, they had 2.55 points per drive. Yeah, that was 42nd. They weren't as efficient, but turnovers were the drive.
It was weird. They were number 1 in yards per play in the Big 12, but number 11 in points per drive. And those two things should not happen at the same time. That's what I mean. They got in their way more than they were a bad offense. They were a good offense, just got in their own way.
It was the worst points per drive, excluding the COVID season in 2020. It was the worst points per drive since 2019, Chris Kleiman's first season with Messingham calling the plays, the 2.55. Now, again, to your point, like they made mistakes, untimely mistakes, and they didn't have the best field position because of special teams. That also impacted things. Yeah. So, and now the offense put the defense in bad positions at times as well. But the efficiency part, they weren't off. They were 42nd nationally in points per drive, so it wasn't a disaster by any means. But you would have liked to have seen that jump, considering the year prior they were at 3.03, which was 11th in America. And so, growing pains as a first-year OC, you kind of expect that jump in the second year. But Matt Wells has done this before, so he won't have probably those same growing pains. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been a head coach at multiple stops, and he's been kind of the lead guy as an offensive guy at those programs. So I don't worry about as much, growing pains here. And the fact that he's an internal hire that's gotten familiar with Avery Johnson and gotten to coach him for a season and be involved with this team. He knows the roster that they have. He knows the guys they have in place, what they need to work on, what they need to get better at. And so I think Wells is going to be fine, and kind of excited to see what he brings to the offense. DY, I was just pulling the numbers real quick. It was interesting because I think you're right that you go back to Utah State, they were more balanced. At Tech, it's a matter of maybe what he inherited. They were number 10 in the country in passing play percentage his first year at Tech in 2019 at 57%, and then they were at 55% in 2020, which was number 15 in the country. I had thought they ran a faster pace, or Matt Wells maybe did, but I went back to
blistering faster than what K-State did last year, but not blistering fast.
Absolutely. I mean, K-State last year, 66.4 plays, number 89 in America. The year prior under Colin Klein, 13th in the country at 75.4 plays per game. If you look at Texas Tech and Matt Wells last year, 66 plays per game, 110th in the country. 2019, nearly 78 plays per game, though, which was number 9 in America. But you go to Utah State, and they ranked anywhere between 60 to 105 several of those seasons in plays per game, right around 69 to 72 plays per game. And much of those years outside of 2013, they were at almost 79 at 23rd in the country. And that was when everybody was playing fast. So I'm just really interested to hear his perspective, as the media gets to talk to him. We've had him on the show before when he was named the quarterbacks coach and co-OC, but he's not going to obviously tell us exactly what he plans to do with the offense, but it'll be fascinating to see the differences from a schematics point of view that K-State utilizes offensively under Lepak and him.
One thing he did say when he kind of took the job last year was throw to score, run to win, and I wonder if he takes that seriously as the primary play caller.
I'd imagine so. I do want to point out, because I think there's more ground to cover here with Matt Wells. I want to do that after the break, but I feel like the way Cole was describing Conor Riley on the way out here is like, we go through this, there's like the memes of like people watching a Chiefs game, and it's like, you are here, and we need like a map of like Cole's journey during the season and in the off season of where he lands on K-State's coaching staff and things like this, because I feel like during the season, it was lots of furor, and in the immediate aftermath of the season, like they're demanding staff changes, and now here we are, and it's like, hey, Conor Riley did a pretty good job with the offensive line. We're just here. We're at this point of the offseason. Eventually, we're going to we'll build up into from, this program's doomed to be 8-4 forever. We'll build up to at some point K-State's winning 11 games, and then this will kick off. So I'm just on the map. We're at the spot where Cole starts to turn a new leaf a little bit on the offensive coordinator.
And I've done a similar evolution. I would just say it's sometimes it's easier and we rush to scrutinize as things are happening in real time when we don't have the appropriate perspective. You get a little bit removed from the season. You can look at all the numbers, be like, this offense would have been better if they just didn't turn the ball over as much as they did and where they did and when they did.
First of all, okay, there's a reason I put my phone in airplane mode during games nowadays, and you guys give me shit about it, but it's so I don't tweet immediate emotional reactions during the games, all right? So go through that roller coaster. Second of all, K-State, if not for some OC issues, plays in the Big 12 championship this season. So the Houston game I put squarely on Conor Riley, and that derailed the season, in my opinion, and the reason K-State didn't play in the Big 12 championship. See, look what you made me do. I was trying to be nice, and now I had to circle back.
That Houston game was a boneheaded decision. That it kind of felt more administrational than anything. Like it was Kleiman saying, let's throw the ball here.
Yeah, it was inexcusable, and that could have caught, maybe it beat them twice with the Arizona State game the following weekend and the debacle they were to start that game. But again, obviously,
I think Arizona State was just better.
Well, they're really good, but K-State looked flat. So I don't know. I think that was part of it too. But yeah, obviously they were a really good team.
Well, it seems like we're on a good start with Matt Wells here to talking ourselves into 10 or 11 wins. So I'm excited for that. We'll have more Matt Wells talk in just a moment. Somebody get Matt Wells some home field apparel. Actually, probably already has some. Homefieldapparel.com. Best K-State gear around. You want that hat that Cole has? Homefieldapparel.com. Make sure and go grab that. 50 plus K-State designs, 100 plus other teams there. DY is like a man without a country and no closet right now. So there's no chance of him having home field apparel because people were losing his luggage. He's been a vagabond away from home for a week and a half. So nothing there. Is there any team that you'd like to specifically shout out here, DY, if you did have your home field apparel?
Let me think on that for 2 seconds. I probably have something written down. How about UConn? 2 quad 3 losses.
Okay.
Just like their state. In early, 2 rings, Baldy. Yeah.
Do you have UConn home field apparel?
I do.
Okay.
What about Illinois? TJ Shan's jersey. They retired it upside down.
That was funny. Take a mental note. Whoever is going to get Jacob Pullen's jersey up in the rafters, let's not do that.
Do you have any Drake home field apparel for the next head coach of the Kansas Jayhawks when they push Bill Self out for McCollum?
I don't. I do have a KU shirt that I could have clowned them for because they've lost 4 Saturday games in a row.
I'm going to be a little bit careful on that because, the K-State's playing Utah tonight, all right? So be careful with that. Although I think that could help that Utah's coming off now an emotional win, beating Kansas on Saturday. Anyway,
Kansas just has to change the schedule so they don't play on Saturdays.
No, or go on the road. There's a lot of things Kansas might have to change. They want to be a Big 12 champion caliber squad. Anyway, they've got KU gear at homefieldapparel.com. You can use promo code 3MOD24 for 15% off your first order, whatever it is that you're going to do with it. You can buy it there. And we're back with more on Matt Wells in just a moment.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Okay, top storyline to me with this, which of course is brought to you by our good friends at Alenco. Go to alencohome.com. That's ALENCO home.com. If you have any home improvement needs, they can hook you up, and they are Cat fans as well. So you'll be in good hands if you need home improvement help there. The question I have here about Matt Wells is how do you think this meshes and plays with Avery Johnson? Because we've talked about the season, like there are a lot of things that need to come together. Part of it is the offensive line, and we'll discuss that in a minute with Brian Lepak and how that goes. But the thing that clearly will elevate the season to where everybody wants it to go, a Big 12 championship game, like that is going to rest in the hands of the development of Avery Johnson, who was good, not great last year and erratic. So how well do you think this will play DY with Avery and company offensively and where it raises perhaps the ceiling of the offense?
Three things come to mind. One is just knowing people around the program. I think Avery Johnson was pretty excited about this move. So that shows you that he's throwing the weight of his support behind Matt Wells because he believes and trusts Matt Wells. Two, I like it because Matt Wells is the guy that he's been talking to for a full year, right? You had Conor Riley up in the booth for most of the season. Wells was the one down the sideline kind of talking to him. So I think they're on the same page and kind of speak the same football language. And like Cole said earlier, that kind of continuity I think is big because you do expect a quarterback about to start his second year of being a second year of starting to take a real big jump. It's hard to do that maybe if you lose your quarterback coach. It's hard to do that when you lose your coordinator, but I think Matt Wells is enough there to kind of keep that train moving. And then this is probably me more doing inside baseball, but I think quarterbacks just respond to quarterback coaches more than offensive line coaches. I mean, I think everyone listening and both of you guys too, you kind of understand a way that an offensive line coach communicates to someone and kind of operates is way different than a quarterback coach. The approach, the mentality, and demeanor is a lot less, I guess, hard-nosed and more cerebral, and I think that will be good for Avery as well.
I just think there's going to be maybe a little better alignment. I mean, you got your guy that's your quarterback's coach during the week, and now he's the guy calling the plays too, right? So he's the guy working with Avery Johnson, and now he's the guy that's going to be calling the shots on game day and scripting the game plan. And I don't know specifically what Matt Wells' role was in developing the game plan when he was the co-OC and the quarterback's coach versus what he is now. He's obviously going to have the primary control over everything, and so I think that will help Avery as well. There'll be more alignment when it comes to that. And like DY said earlier, like if you went and hired an outside guy to be the offensive coordinator, which I don't think that was ever a thought, but if you did that, then you're probably not retaining Matt Wells. And then you're talking about an outside hire coming in to coach Avery Johnson, and that stunts the developmental process for him. So now you keep him as your quarterback's coach and your OC, works another year with him on technique and footwork, and knows Avery well on what he needs to get better at. It doesn't slow the process, and then they have spring ball to implement the new schemes, etc. So I'm happy with it, and I think it's the best case scenario that case they could have asked for with just having a Matt Wells on the staff. Like DY said earlier, like they had planned for this essentially. Like if Conor Riley moved on, they had a guy as a former head coach and a former offensive coordinator sitting right there as your quarterback's coach who could easily step in and fill the void, and they were able to do so quickly, not a drawn-out process.
It's the best case for continuity purpose technically, because if we're going by the literal term here, this will be Avery's third different offense coordinator in 3 seasons. But I think it's a little bit less like drastic than it sounds because you are retaining Matt Wells.
I was going to make that exact point because I saw some people talking about that over the past week. Like, man, sucks that with this quarterback, high profile, high ceiling, you're going to give him a third offensive coordinator in 3 years. But I think it's a very good point that this is not going to be much of a shift from what it was last year based on how all of this was set up. So I think I don't worry about that nearly as much. Just to close the book, I guess, on Matt Wells, and we've talked plenty about this, but judging by what his history has been, what we know about that, Utah State, then to Texas Tech, where, Texas Tech fans were not big fans of his, but that was, the guy was having to be a CEO, and that's a completely different thing than just being an offensive coordinator. I have viewed this, I guess I'll put it this way. I have viewed this as a high floor, not sure what the ceiling looks like with Matt Wells as the offensive coordinator. Is that a fair characterization here? Like, what do you think the ceiling is with this offense?
Yeah, I don't know what to think of the ceiling. I will say he's probably, assuming those offensive line pieces come together, a lot to work with for a first-year guy at Kansas State. You have a high-profile quarterback, you have a high upside running back in Joe Jackson, an explosive playmaker in Dylan Edwards. You bring back an 800-yard receiver in Jace Brown with, 2 or 3 transfers and a redshirt freshman that you like. You still got to get those guys across the finish line to where you want them to be, but that's kind of a lot to work with. Maybe even maybe even a touch more to Conor Riley, though he did have DJ Giddens, so that probably changes the calculus a little bit. I think high floor, unknown ceiling is a good way to put it. And like you said about his time at Texas Tech, I would just go to say, like, the week before he got fired there, they were 5-2. I just don't think he was ever going to be embraced at Lubbock.
Yeah, and he never really was. Didn't really get much of a shot there. I mean, really, the head coach for 2.5 seasons, fired midway through his third year. That's not enough time, and it just probably was never a fit. Like,
some of it, Cole, just to interject, like some of it, they got mad at him because of something he said about Lubbock. I'm trying to remember what the specifics were of that. It was like on his coach's show. He made a comment about
uninformed about what was in Lubbock.
They had a lot of reason to get pretty disenchanted with him, and yeah,
I think they asked him on a radio show, like where he likes to go out to eat, and he said something like he doesn't get out and doesn't really know Lubbock very well. I don't know, like
something like that. Yeah.
So it was yeah. Look, I mean, his 2018 offense at Utah State with Jordan Love was one of the most dynamic offenses in the country. And then, when you look at the start of his career, DY, like Chucky Keaton was his quarterback, and they were tremendous in 2013 when he started as the head coach. I think he was the offensive coordinator at Utah State first, then the head coach, and Chucky Keaton, a quarterback. And then Keaton, who had been tremendous for them, got hurt, and they battled up and down injuries for a couple of years, and the offense has struggled some, but they were terrific as an offense in that first year or two under Matt Wells, and then there was a 3-year lag, and then really good in 2018. Then you look at Texas Tech, 2019, 4.2 yards per carry on the ground. 2020 as the head coach, 4.9 on the ground. That's 35th in the country. And then 21, 4.2 again, 66 in the country. And you look at yards per play on his 3 Tech offenses, 2019, 5.8, ranks 46th in America, 5.6, 52nd in 2020, and 6.4 in 2021, his final year, though. Keep in mind, he got fired midway through the season. So that's just some numbers on his Texas Tech teams. But, yeah, I mean, I think Matt Wells could be really solid for K-State, and Chris Kleiman. He knows Kleiman well, kind of knows what he wants, and it's Colin Klein was internal. This is technically internal too, but like this is one of the few times Chris Kleiman's kind of gone out, and like Matt Wells has never coached under Chris Kleiman, correct? Like they've never until this last year. And so Courtney Messingham was Kleiman's OC at North Dakota State, and then Colin Klein was on the staff with Kleiman his entire time at Kansas State before he promoted him, and it felt like an obvious choice. And here is a guy with probably a little different perspective on offensive philosophy than what Chris Kleiman has been accustomed to, that's going to become the OC. And so I'll be really curious what that looks like.
Yeah, it looks like here the thing with Matt Wells was that he got asked on his radio show, like, what's your favorite thing about living in Lubbock? And just didn't have a good answer, had to stammer around. It kind of stumped him. So people did not like that, and that was already at a point where I think things were starting to turn in a negative direction. So,
and this will be the first time that Chris Kleiman has ever been a head coach at this, between North Dakota State and K-State, and Mike counting Loras College, between North Dakota State and K-State without Conor Riley on a staff. Without Conor Riley on every single staff.
I was going to say, and Chris Kleiman became a head coach at North Dakota State in 2014. Conor Riley has been his offensive line coach every year as his head coaching career.
Is he tight end coach to begin? Nope.
I just checked, actually, because I was right before you brought that up. And Riley, he did start as tight ends coach, I believe, but when Kleiman became the head coach in 2014, he promoted Riley to offensive line coach and run game coordinator eventually. So he has been his O-line coach his entire head coaching career.
Yeah.
So,
and for those a little bit worried about Lepak, another example, most offensive line coaches at some point were tight end coaches.
Well, perfect transition. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that Brian Lepak is a really bright up-and-coming coach. I mean, there was chatter this offseason about Oklahoma potentially swiping him away. So it's nice to have him here. It's, in essence, a promotion for him to go from tight ends coach to offensive line coach, and maybe he is next in line if things go well with Matt Wells and he takes a head job somewhere or whatever. Maybe he's the next guy that is in line. But for now, he really needs to hone in. Like, I think we all believe in him as a recruiter, right? Big part of, like Lincoln Cure, Brian Lepak, we believe in him as a recruiter, believe in him as a bright, talented, up-and-coming mind. But the question to me is, like, how good is he, like, right now, today, at being able to mold an offensive line together? Because they will need that this year. I mean, you do have some holes to replace. particularly going to need to work in some transfer tackles, which is, I guess I can say this. I mean, it's a different sort of skill set to be able to make the transfer portal work today than it has been as an offensive line coach in the past, or a coach of any position in the past, to kind of infuse them into your lineup and make it go. So maybe Brian Lepak, being a younger guy, is more suited to do that. But you're going to need to get 3 transfer offensive linemen plugged in and ready to roll here. At least 2 probably at the tackles. How do we feel like he is equipped to do that right now in day one?
I'm going to have blind confidence until he gives me a reason not to, because he's passed every test in his time at Kansas State and everything that he's been asked to do. He's checked off all these, boxes in what he's had to do, and he deserves this opportunity too.
Yes.
Because if you don't give him this opportunity, then he probably has a little bit of a wandering eye, because he wonders what his upward trajectory is ever going to look like at Kansas State. So it was necessary for him and his ambitions as a coach. It was necessary for Kansas State to kind of stay in the good graces there, because you want him as part of your coaching staff moving forward, not just for this year, but for plenty of years down the line. He's already got, a little bit of Oklahoma interest before, and obviously that's where he's from. So yeah, none of us know how this is going to work, but it was also an essential and necessary change to take this chance, both for Kansas State at this point in time, but for him as well. And I would say, in addition to kind of infusing these transfers, one thing too is just like stay healthy too, right? Because I think that's kind of been the bugaboo at times for both John Pastore and Andrew Langang. And if those two stay healthy, that alleviates some of the issues or some of the holes that we're talking about this offseason.
And I mean, I saw somebody ask us on our Discord at patreon.com/3mile earlier this week, is it a promotion from tight ends coach to offensive line coach?
Absolutely.
It absolutely is. I mean, you're coaching 5 starters on the offensive side of the football.
He probably getting his salary doubled, or maybe more than doubled.
Yeah. Nobody coaches more starters on a team than the offensive line coach in terms of position groups.
It's the position coach along with quarterback that probably does involve the most instruction.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you, I mean, none of us really know what this looks like with Lepak as offensive line coach, and we're speculating here. All we know is he's a tremendously bright guy. He's very well respected and liked in that locker room. He's been coveted by other programs. He's seen as an up-and-comer. And the tight ends coach at Kansas State is an important, integral part of this offense under Chris Klieman. I mean, because they utilize tight ends so much, and they entrusted him with that for 3 seasons. And Ben Sennett set all the tight end records under Lepak's watch. And so he's got to get a little bit of credit there for that. Now, I will say this year, I think that the tight end room, obviously tons of touchdowns early in the year when it comes to that. I think they left maybe a little bit at times to be desired in the run blocking game out on the perimeter. But Lepak's been a really good position coach at tight ends. He's been up in the box, I believe, every year. DY, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's been up
this year, right? We had that conversation because he was down on the sideline, and him and Conor Riley flipped towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I was going to say, so he did flip and went back up to the box right at the end. But you will recall in like the Big 12 championship game when ESPN panned, or ABC, to the booth.
He was up there with Klein.
Yeah, he was sitting with Klein, and so he's seen things from above as well. Now, will he be down on the field? Like, that'll be interesting too, to figure out, like, will Matt Wells want to be up in the box talking down with Avery? Because this last year, keep in mind, Matt Wells was down on the sideline every game with Avery right in his ear. Will he go up in the box? Will Lepak go up in the box, or will he be down on the field? Conor Riley, I think preferred probably to be down with his offensive lineman on the field, but he was in the box until the last game of the regular season this last year, the last home game versus Cincinnati. And so that'll be another question to solve for. But look, it's a challenging job to step in, especially with all the holes K-State is filling on the offensive line and transfers. But it's exciting to see what Lepak can do with this group, and I have confidence in him. I ultimately think they're going to be okay. The tight ends hire is going to be important because, K-State's got some talented tight ends. You got to appease them too. You got Lincoln Kier, the first 5-star in school history, coming in. You got to figure out how you're going to utilize him. And then also you got Garrett Oakley, who's a tremendously talented guy, Will Ancio, a very bright future as well, and others. So that'll be an important hire that I think they're probably close to wrapping up there as well, which will probably be an external hire.
Yeah, well, because one thing that we should mention with this is that with the announcement of Brian Lepak as the offensive line coach, Drew Little was announced as assistant offensive line coach. So, like, if there was thought of, hey, does Drew Little bump up to become the tight ends coach, that was squashed with that, which would lead us to believe that this is now going to be an external hire, a tight ends coach.
Yeah, and I know there's been some names floated out there, but I haven't really been able to pin anything down. I just know that, like you guys said, it's going to be an external hire, and I wonder if it'd be someone that you would want up in the booth. Going back to what Cole just said, I don't know if that's a skill set that you look for, or how you kind of look for that, because I would imagine Wells in the booth and LePack on the sideline.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. They want to go young or go a little older.
I'd like them. I don't know if they will, but I would like them to go young. But
yeah. This seems like that would be a nice opportunity to slide somebody in there. Yeah,
I've had some people internally tell me that they are probably in need of needing to be younger too. Like, just because they've been there now since 19, I think, right? Some of it, like, they've aged a little bit more than maybe they realized.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need it. I've always viewed it as this, guys, and maybe I'm wrong in this. I've always thought, like, your D-line coach, D-tackle coach, like, needs to be a recruiter. Your tight ends coach, like, those are the types of positions that need to be able to really recruit. But then again, tight ends is such an integral part of this offense as well under Chris Kleiman that, you got to be able to coach for sure as well. So that's going to be a key part of it too. As we talk through this and we talk about the cycle of motions, you guys are probably right. When we start doing our preview shows come August, not only will I probably pick K-State to win 10, 11 games, but I'll probably pick K-State. I'll set over-unders for every school record offensively. Once again, you guys, I might need to let you guys do that this year. Set the numbers, or maybe people find it more entertaining when I set some outlandish.
I will probably be a little higher on K-State this year than I was last year in the preseason, because I think this is the year that they have to pounce.
No, really, and Avery Johnson jump. One last point on the getting younger here, and I think I like what Cole says about, like, great spots on your staff. This is one of those great spots on your staff to have somebody that's a more dynamic recruiter. I think, like, some people might respond to that and be like, well, I mean, does it really matter as much now in the era of NIL when so much of it is just about, how much money and that does neutralize it a little bit, but we're about to go to the revenue sharing era, which means a lot to be determined here. But for right now, everybody would be operating under the same revenue sharing cap. So you'd be working with, it's going to be similar at first to a salary cap. Now, there are extra NIL benefits you can get, but they're pretty stringently sticking to right now. It would appear that it's going to have to go through a clearinghouse, and it has to be a legitimate NIL deal, meaning it has to be a legitimate, you're going to do commercials for the car dealership or whatever. Like, it can't just be pay for play. And if they are going to be serious about cracking down on that, like, you're going to be on a fairly level playing field. And then I think it starts to tilt back toward, again, what's your ability to actually recruit, because the dollar value would be a little bit more similar. Now, there's also going to be GMs become way more important, and you're seeing that happen at Texas Tech with a guy who was almost pulled away by Notre Dame. How do you manage the money? I'm getting way too deep down the road, but my point is, I think it's going to become more important again in the revenue sharing era here, at least at first, to be able to recruit. Like, you can't just lean on the money. You're going to have somebody that can recruit.
Yeah, GMs are important. I think the money could be the same, and if so, then it becomes recruiter does become. Well, and even if it isn't, what I was told is, like, you'd still would like to have that recruiter, because then you can break the tie. Like, the recruiter, you at least have the tiebreaker in those situations. And then another thing it's going to be, and I'm not certainly talking about sport to sport, because other than the basketball blue bloods, I think sport to sport, they're going to allocate it. Most schools are going to allocate it similarly, but how you allocate it between players on your roster and positions on your roster will go into play too. Maybe Kansas State allocates more money towards tight ends than another school, for instance.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the rundown on where things are at with the football staff. A lot of changes going on there. We'll obviously keep you posted on what's going on with the tight end position. So, do you have a thought on this basketball game at BYU real quick for those who, if you're not, this will be, I guess, tune out if you're listening to this past Monday when K-State's already had the Utah game. Obviously, Utah becomes a must-win. I'm not shocked at all, really, by what happened at BYU. It's a tough place to play, man. It's a tough place to play, and I know people are like frustrated at this point about like, do we have to say that about every football and basketball game in Provo? Like, yeah, you do. They got a lot of people there. It's loud. They play well at home. BYU's been a really good team at home this year, and it's judging by the comments of Doug McDaniel after the game, K-State maybe was riding a little bit too high off of the win streak and didn't come in with enough of a sense of urgency, and it definitely did feel like that. Like BYU had more of a sense of urgency consistently throughout the game, outside of a couple spurts here or there from K-State.
Kids, they lost the game in the first 10 minutes or so just because they didn't seem to play with the appropriate amount of intensity out of the gate. I also thought this was bound to happen. You kind of on a 6-game winning streak, you become due for a loss. You're playing at a tough place to play. And third, you got to get better play from your front court. You can't get essentially goose eggs from both Coleman Hawkins and David Gasson.
Yeah, I mean, it was Gasson's worst game in quite some time. I mean, it wasn't – I didn't think K-State was nearly assertive enough or aggressive enough in the interior. They let Kibakeda, the center for BYU, who's not – I mean, he's pretty mid, guys, to be honest. He averages under a block shot per game, and I think he had 4 or 5 blocks. Like, looked like an intimidating force or presence against Kansas State in that game when they went inside and got swatted multiple times, and like that shouldn't happen. And so I didn't think K-State was aggressive enough, strong enough, assertive, and it's going to be hard to win games when Coleman Hawkins has the 2-game stretch that he's done. They're fortunate they beat Arizona because, look, Coleman Hawkins in his last 2 games is 4 of 20 from the floor. He's averaged 6 points in each of those 2 games. He only had 2 rebounds against Arizona as they crushed K-State on the offensive glass, and then in this game he has no assists. K-State as a team hardly has any assists. They couldn't get anything going offensively. That was disappointing because BYU is not a great defensive team. They're 120th in 2-point percentage allowed, and I think at halftime, K-State was 29% from 2, and BYU was 71% from 2, and that tells you that you're just not being aggressive enough on the interior, being a tough enough team, and just felt like they didn't have that sense of urgency in this one. Maybe they felt fatigued from the 6-game stretch and the grind of some of the huge wins they had, but now you put yourself, and again, you might be listening to this after the fact, but this Utah game is a must-win as a result of that. You got to get Max Jones back on track. He's been in the single digits scoring-wise the last 2 games, and then Brendan Hassan, guys, had a 5 or 6 game stretch where he'd made 50% from 3, and in his last 3 games, now he's 6 of 22 from 3, which is 27%. So it feels like he's due. Max hasn't hit a 3 in 2 games. If you could get those 2 going from the outside again, that'll open up some things. And look, they should beat Utah. They're 2.5-point underdogs, but they should.
Yeah, I think I saw 1.5, but it might be 2.5 now. It'll probably be dated, but like Utah's not a good team, but somehow they figure things out at home and win very ugly. So
just foul them. Just foul them.
Oh, yeah, they are the worst free throw shooting team maybe in the history of college basketball.
They're shooting 61% from the line, which is 362nd in the country. Okay.
The guy go 1 of 9 against KU on Saturday.
Lawson Lovering is that guy. He's their 7'1" center who's a good defensive player. But guys, Lawson Lovering now in his 4-year basketball career, he started his first 2 years, played his first 2 years at Colorado, then been at Utah 2 years. He's now 100 of 235 at the foul line in his career, which is 42%. And this season,
it's there a lot.
Yeah. He dropped his free throw percentage on Saturday night alone from 39% to 35% by going 1 of 9. KU just started resorting to fouling him. He's shooting 35% from the free throw line on the season. And look, I say this, and he'll probably have a fluke game against Kansas State and hit like 80%, right? But he was not even close on his attempts. Yeah, on his attempts on Saturday night. So if this was a game where you might throw a few extra bodies out there and play hack-a-shack with Lawson Lovering and Ugo, some of those Utah players.
It sounds like a big Ugo game to me, is what that sounds like.
Labides at him.
Point of reference, as frustrating as K-State has been at the line this year, which K-State's 309th in the country, K-State shoots 68% from the line as a team. That's 7% better than Utah here. So, and like, it's been driving obviously all of us insane. I mean, they left the door wide open for Arizona last week because of that bad free throw shooting. So yeah, I don't know, Coleman Hawkins needs to be better. Not going to survive many games with him off the way that he was. I'm not going to over the top pulverize him because people tend to do that too much because of the amount of money that he's making. But I'm sure he knows it. Like he's got to be better than what he was.
Yeah, he's just in a 2-game slump. People are really hammering him right now for being in a 2-game slump, but like you're ignoring like the 20 games before that where he was pretty good then. So, and I think I'll say this, and in these 2 games when he doesn't have it going on, I think his constant complaining to officials wears on people too.
Yeah.
You're much more likely to accept that when he's playing well. So he's going to snap out of it sooner or later. Hopefully it's against Utah. I will say I get free food today because 2 promotions were hit at the Marriott Center. Poor David Gasson. He missed both free throws on a trip to the line in the second half. So I get free Chick-fil-A. And then this is a weird one because you'd think they hit it so often they wouldn't do it. They hit 80 points, so you get a free sub from Jersey Mike's.
So those are your 2 meals today? I'm going to hit
Well,
both of those.
Don't those usually require a ticket stub? Like, did you just swipe a ticket?
You had to, you do the QR code from like the thing.
That is a lot of free food since they pack 20,000 people in the Marriott Center.
Yeah, and you would think it like for the points one, you would want to go a little higher than 80. 80 feels too attainable.
You might need to go into the Jersey Mike's location and just give them some numbers. Maybe they aren't aware of the efficiency of BYU's offense, especially under Kevin Young. I mean, they're a top 20 KenPom offense. Yeah. So,
DY, if you could please introduce the fine folks at Jersey Mike's to Bart Torvik, that would be good.
Yeah. So you know what? It feels like. And I could look like a complete bozo after the fact when you guys listen to this, but it feels like tonight K-State has some guys that are ready to go off again in Hassan, Max, and Coleman. So if they do collectively...
We're probably silly for analyzing this game as much as we are with the little turnaround, but are you worried about the effects of altitude now that they've been there for a couple of days?
I don't know. I hear people say different things. I hear people say that that's actually like it's better after a couple of days once you get adjusted to it, and that it takes longer.
I was in my 3rd morning here. I don't know what happened, but I slept until like noon, and I didn't even mean to. So,
well, actually, John, I have an idea. Maybe for some Patreon content, DY, if you could go find, like chalk out the length of a court somewhere and set your phone timer for 40 minutes. And if you could just run back and forth, you can take like 10-second interval breaks, like when you're on offense, maybe stand a little, but like report back to us on how gassed and fatigued you are by the end of that 40. And we'll see. Yeah, you can sit 5. Like we're only going to play you 35 minutes. Okay. And then give us a report back on that. But Doug was fabulous again, offensively against BYU. And you hope he just continues to ascend and he just needs more help. I mean, the other guys got to help him out, and hopefully that game comes tonight against Utah. And then you get a break. You basically have a bye because you don't play again until the Sunday, and you're playing Monday. So you can get some fresh legs then to recover from the altitude, and you're at home against Arizona State, a game you have to win as well. Chance to start to chalk off some wins there because you probably got to go 5-1 down the stretch. To make the NCAA tournament. Win this one, beat Arizona State, it becomes more manageable in your mind because then you're talking about 3-1 with 2 of those games at home still, even though Iowa State is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, they had climbed up to... Did they get to the top team in next 4 out to Lenardi, or was it the second team in next 4 out?
Top 5th, yeah, they were essentially the 5th team out heading into the BYU game. And then teams that they needed to lose, guys, lost in front of them, and that's why... They probably would have been in the field if they had won at BYU. Unfortunately, they dropped 5 spots in the net, losing at BYU, a top 40 team in the net. Don't get me started on that.
The freaking net. You beat a top 13 team at home in Arizona and move up, like you just inch up like 2 spots, and then you go lose to a top 40 team on the road in one of the toughest places to play in the league, and you drop 5 spots. The net can burn in hell. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, so then Arizona State was 63rd in the net, and they lose at home to number 79 TCU at home, and they dropped to 65. They dropped 2 spots for losing a home game to the 79 team in the net on Saturday. KU loses at Utah, the number 78 team in the net. KU drops from 11 to 14. They drop 3 spots. K-State loses to a top 40 team. They drop 5. again, I know it's all about these efficiency and double digits, and I think it's silly. Okay, I'm a
Threshold. You can't lose by 15. Yeah.
I'm a Bart Tor. Well, F Kevin Young for having that guy shoot that three and not just letting the shot clock expire. All right,
That was to get them jersey mics. That's the problem.
That was bullshit. And also, I want a technical foul assessed on Kevin Young. He literally reached out on the court and moved his player right before that to put him in position. I mean, come on. So, anyways,
I didn't see much on the Tang Tech either. I didn't see anything.
Nah, I hadn't really seen that crew much this season. I think that's the first time I saw any of those guys. The only guy I recognized was the white-haired gentleman who officiated the game. So,
who do we have tonight?
I don't know. We got a good broadcast crew. We got Roxy Bernstein and Sean Farnham on the call on ESPN. So that's a significant upgrade from Tim Welsh, who might be the worst broadcasting analyst in the sport. So,
wow, I don't know. I mean, they're okay. They're okay.
And John, you have to say that you're a professional broadcaster, so you gotta stick up for those guys.
Game notes don't have the officials yet, so
okay.
I can probably find that out, and I'll give you a report back.
Well, sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/streamall, and join the Discord, and I'm sure Cole will.
I'll break that
for us there.
Well, the scouting report on each official and their entire background before tip-off, well before, so we'll get that to you.
Can Matt Wells give us a scouting report on Craig Smith? Weren't they at Utah State together?
That's a good question. They probably were at some point. Craig Smith, like that Utah State job has like become a carousel where the guy gets hired every year. Like Utah State's program just continues to be good every year, and then someone hires their guy away. And
who was the coach when Poland beat him in the tournament?
Oh, that was he was an older guy I think he's the Utah State all-time winningest coach. Morrell, I want to say. I sat literally right behind the Utah State bench covering that game, and that was in Tucson.
Jibber was at the Marriott Center on Saturday night. Jibber Fredette.
BY, how dare you interrupt my Mike Morrell? Is it Mike Morrell? Still, but Morrell's right.
Moral.
Okay, yeah, I think he was the Utah State all-time winning. He'd been there a long time, and K-State won that one, and then the Wisconsin locker room was about as sad as a locker room as I've experienced after that one in the second round game. So
then, okay, he was there forever, and then it went Craig Smith, Ryan Odom, Danny Sprinkle. Yeah.
Ryan Odom went from, he was the UMBC coach that K-State played in the NCAA tournament that upset Virginia seed. Odom got the Utah State head coaching job, and now Ryan Odom, I want to say, is the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth head coach. So,
by the way, Kansas State's just made it official. Luke Wells, Matt Wells' brother, will be the tight ends coach.
Okay, well, that's what we had thought, and that is an older coach.
I was going to say, that's everything that we just said about getting younger. We're thinking about. I know he was at Tulsa. That's all I know. I don't know a thing about Luke Wells beyond that. Just in fairness, but they staff.
He's on the Tech and Utah State staffs, right? Yeah.
Not feeling real young and dynamic and recruity right now, but
he was. He also, I think, was at Iowa State at one point in his career. I was just pulling up his coach, but
it's like on like the Paul Rhodes staff, like what?
Well, Wells arrived in Ames following 6 seasons at Louisiana Monroe, where he began as an offensive grad assistant in 2023 before being promoted. So he was the wide receivers and tight ends coach at Iowa State from 2009 to 12.
So is that Paul Rhodes?
Oh yeah, that's Paul Rhodes. Yeah.
So was he there with like Paul Rhodes had like Tom Herman on that staff too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Utah State, Texas Tech kind of followed Matt around. I mean, look, that was the name that was floating on Friday, and so when we were talking about youthful and not, that was probably wishful thinking because that was probably where this was going. So I think he can probably coach. Again, he's older, so you're not. I don't know about his recruiting chops. I don't know anything about Luke Wells, to be honest, other than what we heard on Friday. So I hope it works. And
I mean,
I don't think it's like a terrible decision or anything. And I don't think a tight ends coach is going to make or break the direction of your team, especially this year. They clearly went for more for familiarity than anything.
which on brand. Yep, it's just. I mean, it's on brand.
Look, I'm sure he can coach tight ends pretty darn well. I mean, he's basically been a tight ends coach, or had some capacity in that. He coached the tight ends and inside receivers at Texas Tech. He coached the tight ends at Utah State.
And in fairness to his recruiting chops, I think he was like Wells' like recruiting coordinator every time he was head coach.
And look, I like Matt Wells a lot. So if Luke is anything like Matt, then I think it'll be fine. I'm not going to melt down over the tight end hire here. I'm sure he can coach, and they know what they're getting here with Luke. So hopefully it works out.
Maybe they wanted someone that had coached with Matt Wells for an extended amount of time.
Yeah, there's familiarity for sure between.
Well, and they have plenty of talent at tight end, obviously on the roster. So if you got a guy that can coach them up, then that's a good thing. But you are, of course, my mind immediately drifts to you're after Ian Premer, right now, and hope it goes well. Say that.
I'm not sure I was going to go with him before.
Yeah, I know. But you get a young dynamic recruiter in there that makes a good impression with him. Maybe that.
It's just interesting because one of the other guys they reached out to was kind of the polar opposite, like really young, right, up and comer.
The role Rendex coach at Iowa State, but then he got hired in the NFL. So.
Yeah, Detroit Lions hired him to be the was it receivers coach? I mean, he got a true position coach at the NFL job, maybe tight ends.
And
actually, look, it was tight ends.
How about that? NFL, Big 12 is not going to have to fend off the NFL for all of its coaches.
NFL is going into college more and more.
Yeah, I actually just saw one of your colleagues, DY, was Andy Staples. I think he did Heartland College Sports podcast, but he said that Matt Campbell is the ideal NFL guy and that the NFL should be coming after more guys like Matt Campbell.
I agree. Completely agree. Matt Campbell should just go ahead and move on to the NFL. I think Lance Leipold, too. I think he'd be a great NFL head coach. So.
I don't know why that's funny to me, but picturing Lance Leipold on an NFL sideline, I don't know. I can't do it. It's not working. Okay, well, I think we've arrived at the end of the show then, if that's where we're at, discussing Lance Leipold's NFL prospects. Thank you to all of our great sponsors, Holiday Distillery, Home Field Apparel, AlencoHome.com to get your home improvement needs taken care of. Thank you to Tucker Franklin filling in today behind the scenes. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon here on 3 Mall.